Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of The Bullet. My name is Paul Lathrop. I'm the Deputy Director of New Media for the Second Amendment Foundation. Joining me today, as he does every other Friday, from the great state of Washington. Well, maybe not so much anymore on gun rights, but it's still an awesome place to visit. And they are, I'm going to say they're not in the bottom, but they're maybe in the bottom half of gun rights states. Tom Walls out of the Firearms Academy of Seattle. Tom, how's it going today, man?
Well, right now we're having a heck of a windstorm. I'm waiting for trees to go down or at least driveway to clean up. But we're still in free Lewis County, away from Seattle and Spokane.
There you go. There you go. And well north of Portland and the mess down there. So anyway, we normally, Tom and I, when we do our well, let me start with this, as I should every broadcast. If you're watching, you want to comment on anything we're talking about. If you're watching on Polite Society podcast channels on Facebook or YouTube, you can comment on those videos. If you're watching us anywhere else, go to Twitter, tweet with the hashtag #TheBullet. Normally when Tom and I get started, we talk all about training, but there has been one thing that hit just as we were closing the bullet out yesterday. Didn't have time to get to it, didn't even know about it until I closed the bullet out yesterday. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, that's for Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, the Fifth Circuit came down with a decision yesterday that I messaged Tom and said we should probably talk about this, and Tom agreed with me. This is a big deal, Tom. Now, with this decision that came down yesterday, if you have a restraining order against you, it doesn't necessarily mean, if you live in the Fifth Circuit's area, that your gun rights are automatically going away. They've ruled that part of it is unconstitutional. You've been able to read at least most of the ruling. You've read more than I have. What's your take, man?
Well, first off, I'm not an attorney, so my read of it is always subject to layman's interpretation. But you can look it up on the internet. It's only about 25, 26 pages. But the beginning of it, only, yeah. So I've not had a lot of time to study it as much as I like to, but I think I can form an opinion rather than regurgitating someone else's. The judge that did the writing does a real nice introduction. He says, and I'm quoting, "The question presented in this case is not whether prohibiting the possession of firearms by someone subject to a domestic violence restraining order is a laudable policy goal. The question is whether U.S.C. 922 G8 is a specific statute that does so, is constitutional under the United States Constitution." And they say it is not. In other words, they're not thinking about, is it a good idea that we take away someone's firearms and firearm rights just for a restraining order. That's off the table. Because of Bruin, we don't have that two-pronged thing. It's simply, is it constitutional on the face of it? Remember that the Bruin decision from SCOTUS last year did some cool things, and they restricted interpretation of Second Amendment rights simply to historical meaning of it at the time it was written. Not like, yeah, but I think it's a good idea if we restrict this a little bit, which is the slippery slope that a lot of stuff has been sliding down.
Yep.
That was the purpose of the court, even though you and I were discussing on air or off air that the person for whom this was filed was probably not somebody you'd want to have firearms, which I think makes the interesting read of the case all that more important.
Yes, it does. And let's. I want to dig into this a little bit. I'm going to read directly from the ruling between December 2020 and January 2021. So we're looking at maximum of 8 weeks. The subject was involved in 5 shootings in and around Arlington, Texas. On December 1st, after selling narcotics to an individual, he fired multiple shots into that individual's residence. The following day, he was involved in a car accident. He exited his vehicle, shot at the other driver, and fled the scene. He returned to the scene in a different vehicle and shot at the other driver's car. On December 22nd, he shot at a constable's vehicle. On January 7th, he fired multiple shots into the air after his friend's credit card was declined at a Whataburger restaurant. So we're not exactly talking about somebody who's up for sainthood here.
No. So that really brings to the forefront, I would be happier if this guy didn't have firearms. But the court made it very clear in just what I read that that's not the purpose of that particular review. It may come into something separate if he's convicted of any felony. Of course, that'll change the complexion of it. But reading further with the same thing, he was also convicted of violating USC 18, whatever, because under the law interpreted at that time, he was a prohibited person in possession of a firearm.
Yes, because of the prior restraining order.
Right, right.
And yeah, the old saying is the Lord works in strange ways, and to get a bad guy like this to give a decision like this to the Fifth Circuit is, it would be fantastic if we could say, look at this person who was wrongfully accused and fought it, and all of a sudden it's at the Fifth Circuit and we get a win. However, we're going to take what we can get when we can get it. And let's, what I want to kind of get to here a little bit as we're going to discuss this a little more, where this is a win, if you are married, when you go to get a divorce, restraining orders are very, very common. Most restraining orders, I learned from talking with Alex Uli, is they're restrained from selling joint property. However, it is not incredibly uncommon for there to be a restraining order against contact, and that is the one that will get your firearms rights taken away. All it takes is an ex that's really mad at you and wants to hurt you in any way they can to allege something that may or may not be true, and the judge, out of an abundance of caution, is usually just going to grant that without any evidence, without any. Let's grant the restraining order now. We'll straighten it out later.
Well, I would think that from a judge's point of view, again, not having ever been a judge, but do I want to be the judge who said, he's probably okay? I think a judge has the responsibility to act with an abundance of caution. Not to know that it will happen, but to think, well, I can't guarantee that it won't. And that's really an issue. Understanding for the rest of our discussion that sorry for that, women can abuse men, same-sex partners can abuse each other, but when I talk about it, I'll say man-woman because that's the most common thing.
Yeah.
It's a weapon. I mean, if you're being spiteful, I've seen some really ugly divorces, and I'm sure everyone listening has, where it's a vengeful thing. So we tend to think of, we'll just say bad guy, good guy. Bad guy's doing bad things, good guy gets a restraining order, and there's just those two people involved. And I think if the general public looks at it, they say, oh my God, we don't want him having a gun. Well, the first thing, if it's an abusive domestic violence situation, regardless of which gender is involved of the two, it can be more likely hands and feet, fists, belts, kitchen knives, paperweights, any number of things. In addition to a gun. If I was of hypothetical to hell, if I was of a mind to go and kill my wife, I love you dearly, hon. But if I was of a mind to do that to my wife and I could survive it, the lack of a firearm would not stop me, because hands, feet, belts, baseball bats, croquet bats, whatever. So removing the weapon doesn't do it, but the general public tends to think that without the weapon, they're so weapons focused or not behavior focused. It may make it easier, but it's not going to preclude somebody that wants to do that.
And may I just remind you, your wife is an awesome shot and
wife
one
is
hell of a trainer.
Pistol master and an expert martial artist, and that's someone else's rating, not her own. So I live in a very fortunate household, and her name is Ma'am. we get along okay, but I have more than one relative currently, and they're both females actually. Well, now it's down to two. Isn't that a horrible thing to have to say? Two that are working their way out of abusive relationships, and it's more complicated than simply bad man, good woman, or whatever. Take the gun away. It can't happen. They can't just suddenly lose their temper. If I was to go over to my ex's house, and I don't have an ex, but if I was to do that hypothetically, and take a gun for something special, that's intent, and that intent would probably be present even absent a firearm. It could be baseball bats, kitchen knives. So it gets more complicated. I'm really curious to see if the popular press picks it up. If MSNBC or Fox picks it up. CNN actually had a pretty good write-up on it online, which was a pleasant surprise.
I've not seen it in mainstream media. I tune into multiple newscasts throughout the day, and I've not seen it today. And this hit just yesterday, right at 24 hours ago. So
I'm figuring tonight's news cycle would be the best chance to pick it up. And I'm curious to see the way it's presented. It's not as simple as it sounds. Here's for instance, you and I talked about this also. So we tend to think, again, as I said, a husband beating wife. And I have to be careful because these are people that watch this and they're known in the community. Person I care about, her name is Person I Care About, was abused horribly in every way you can imagine by her father, as were her siblings. She is an adult now. She's working her way out of that. But she called me, or called actually Diane and I, and Person we care about says, I need to buy a firearm, and we eventually found out why, and she has since become quite proficient and extremely well trained to protect herself from that other person and protect her child and her husband. Okay, she's got a good reason to have a firearm, right? Now, there's a separate incident in her life where someone else has physically assaulted her. It even went to trial. The prosecutor thought that the assault against her was prosecutable. Found not guilty, but the bad person number two decided, I'll get you back. I'll file a restraining order against you, and it was the domestic situation. What if Person I Care About had that domestic violence restraining order granted for person number two, bad person number two? She would lose her firearms rights, not be able to protect herself or her child or her family from bad guy number one. And I'm sure there are similar stories or even more complicated ones out there. I can think offhand of maybe half a dozen people in the industry or in the community that have similar situations that are all unique as far as who can abuse who.
Yeah, and let me get a comment up here real quick.
You had comment eyes, I saw that.
Shelley on the Facebook side says, it's been in my online feed, but I run a domestic violence shelter, so my algorithm is skewed.
I think that's a good skew, yeah. I would be interested, Shelley, if you see anything interesting, please comment in.
Yes, absolutely. And even if it's after the fact and we're off the air, just email me, paul@politicsandguns.com. I plan on talking about this again tomorrow on the weekend show.
This is a big freaking deal on both sides of it, both the false accusations that lead to a abrogation of rights and the need to protect people that need restraining orders. In some cases, I'd hate to be the one that decides. I fall on the side of the way the court ruled for various reasons, because there are other ways that people can abuse each other, and the abrogation of rights, by the logic that I read in the decision, makes sense to me. Yeah. But I will grant you, it's not a simple situation.
It's absolutely not. Well, let's do this. We normally talk training on Fridays, and 2 weeks ago we started off a unarmed defense, and I thought we did okay, but we were there were some places I wanted to get to, but we really didn't get there a lot. And let me go ahead and reset this. 2 weeks ago, we talked unarmed defense, and one place I expected us to get to, and we touched on it, but I don't think we got there really well, was situational awareness. The best way, for my opinion, to stay out of situations where you might need to use a firearm for defense, and if you cannot have one with you, the best way to stay out of a situation where you might need to use anything for your own defense is to pay attention to what's going on and stay away from situations where you may get yourself pinched.
If you do that, you start out behind the curve. I read something once somewhere about the Air Force teaching its pilots that a superior pilot uses their superior judgment to avoid situations requiring their superior skill. I don't want to start behind the curve that way. We talk in the industry about the OODA loop from Air Force Colonel John Boyd, and I'm told he hated it being called the OODA loop, so we'll call it the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, and act. And if you can start at the beginning and observe and see a situation as it's developing, or even not knowing for sure it's going to develop, but go, yeah, this is a possibility. Let's just make it impossible by doing what we do. That could be as simple as not walking around like this. How many cell phone zombies have we seen? I tend to look at my phone maybe more than I need to.
Yeah.
But I try to at least do it so the phone's up here, so at least I can see movement. But if I'm down here, my ability to see movement and get that early warning, you're looking for something that's not normal, something that's out of place. We've talked a long time ago about the book Left of Bang, which basically was the Marine Corps saying, hey, look, we're dealing with these, in this case, IED incidents after bang, reading from left to right. Let's start on the right side of that and see what happens before bang. And a principle that they brought forward in the book was looking for things that aren't normal.
Yep.
It's the same thing they do in medicine. You go to your doctor, doc, I don't know what this is, but this ain't right, and explore it from there. I see a situation, the classic one you hear a lot of, probably because it's a good analogy, is it's the middle of August and some guy walks in the room by himself and he's wearing a long coat. Was talking with Mark McYoung the other day about the shooting Jack Wilson was involved in the Texas church, where the guy comes into the church and he's wearing a wig and a long coat that was out of place with everybody else, and he was behaving strangely. That ain't right. Something wasn't quite right, and that alerted security. Didn't turn out too well for two of the folks, but they kept the rest of the church from getting shot up. You have to go with that, and you have to accept the possibility that maybe it's okay. You have to give yourself permission that, I thought that wasn't right, but it's all right. You're not a bad person. You're just playing the odds. If you have to be verbal with somebody, hey, not today, back off. In even a louder and more aggressive voice. My wife has done that to people, and it's spooky when she flips the switch into her other personality. I've seen other people do that, and it's weird. And then they go back and they're normal. But we have to be okay with that, especially women, because women are taught by our society to be kind and gentle and submissive. Okay, well, this probably isn't happening, and I don't want it to happen, so if I ignore it, it's not happening, which is the adult equivalent of la, 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 la. That denial sends a couple of signals to the bad guy. Oh, this looks like food. I'm going to attack this. If you look like food, you will be eaten. I borrow quotes from a lot of folks, and I can't remember the attribution, but yeah. So that awareness, if you can just see it coming. When my wife and I had our son when he was quite young, we had a code word in the family. It's a common thing. You say one word or a phrase or something that says, you do what I tell you right the heck now, don't question, I'll explain later, but this is the real deal. And we would run it as a drill and say, this is a drill, we're going to do this. We actually had it happen a few times. We're in downtown Portland while Portland was still a cool town. We're in the Saturday market, bright sunny day, middle of the afternoon. We're walking along, having fun, and we see some young youths, maybe 4 of them, across the blocked off for pedestrian street, and they're looking around, and all of a sudden they all look at us. That ain't right. That's not normal.
Mm-hmm.
Big crowd of people, and they're focusing on us, man, a woman, and a little kid, probably 8 or 9 years old. Then they start to walk. They're walking toward us, and then they start to intersect us on the street. That ain't right. So we called the code word. We did our thing. We moved into a defensive position. And that's all it took. And then they just went back, and they went back to their original path. No question in my mind, we were being targeted. We saw it ahead of time, and the best thing in the world happened. Nothing.
Yeah, I'm reminded.
He said, go ahead.
I'm reminded. This is the last time that GRPC was in Jacksonville. So this has been 4 or 5 years ago, and it's late night. It is the night had wrapped up, and a lot of this is Saturday night, so Sunday's still coming. And a lot of people had gone out to bars and come back, and I'd gone out to meet some of my friends outside and was having a cigarette. Most of my friends had gone back in. It's just me out now having a cigarette. And I'm leaning up against a pillar. It's just about time for me to go to bed. I'm outside having my last smoke of the night. And a guy had been walking from the parking lot towards the front door. All of a sudden, he makes a left turn, comes right at me. One of two things is going to happen. He's going to ask me for a cigarette, which, big deal. Other is I'm being pegged as somebody that's not that hard of a mark. I'm tired. I'm leaning against a pillar. And Kathy Jackson's wise words came to me. If you're wrong, you're going to offend somebody. Big deal. Command voice came out. I said, go the other way. Really loud, really strong, really directly at this guy. He gave me the look like, what the hell is your problem? And he turned and he went the other way. Was I wrong? Maybe, possibly, maybe even probably. However, that was the only thing that happened that night.
As I've gotten older, I've really gone into, do I care if I hurt a stranger's feelings? You know, if I do something wrongly, I can apologize after, and I can make a sincere apology and feel that I should. But I don't have that obligation. You know, if they break a social rule too, I don't expect an apology from them. There's how many 7+ billion would it be people in the world? I can't please every one of them. You know, I'll be civil and stuff, but if you're encroaching, I'm going to put up some guards. And interestingly enough, think about this. If the other person coming at you is really a good person, they're going to respond differently if they get all huffy about it. That's kind of a clue that, I think my feelings are probably on to some degree. You can always apologize later. Make it a sincere apology. We talked about once about stuff to carry. I carry a throwdown wallet, fairly common in our community. It's got a $20 bill shown on the outside. Got a Visa card that's like 2 years expired, but it still says Visa on it. Hey, man, I'm really sorry. I'll give up $20, $25, $30. It's a lot cheaper than the paperwork or the deductible at the emergency room. Another thing that we tend to get into, especially if we're overconfident with this is a dummy gun, our blaster with us, if the only tool we have is a hammer, all our problems look like nails. We go, I've got a right to be here. You can't bother me. I have rights. And if you get all huffy about it, get closer, and they get closer. So, see it ahead of time. You can be as simple as, hey, can I help you? Acknowledge their presence. The worst thing you can do is go, no, it can't be happening. No, it's not a problem. If I ignore them, he'll go away, which, if it's a bad person, will encourage them.
Yeah, it absolutely will. It absolutely will. I wanted 500 Magna has some comments in. 500.
We bumped into you before, brother.
Yeah, we have, and I want to say, Bud, I really that particular line of conversation. I want to keep it about guns and gun rights and training today. Dude, check back in tomorrow. I can open it up a little bit more tomorrow, and especially Monday night on Polite Society. But I want to keep this a little bit about mostly about training and guns and gun rights. One other, we're coming up on the bottom of the hour here in a little bit, but real briefly, in just a couple minutes, we're gun guys, Tom. You and I carry a lot of stuff on us, including our blaster every day. But if you have to leave your blaster behind you, if you're going to be flying on an airplane, if you're in a situation where something is evolving, is everything you're carrying with you useful? Are there things you should probably just set aside and don't worry about that right now?
Well, with the airplane, TSA knows what a tactical pen looks like. You're not fooling anybody. I carry my keys on a Kubotan, a short stick about yay long. You can't do that. That's specifically prohibited by TSA. Although using it as a flail is fairly useless, it's more annoying. But it's prohibited. My wife and I are fortunate that we've developed our empty hand skills to the point where sometimes I prefer going empty hand if I'm really, really close, because it's more versatile than focusing on one hand with some type of tool. That said, it's a good idea to think about ahead of time 2 or 3 things that you carry with you. What could be a tool? Can you get a belt off? Can you work with a strap? Do you carry a walking cane, which is permitted by TSA? Pens, certainly. What have you got around you? What you want to look for are things that are hard. The easiest things to use, flexible weapons like belts are harder to use skillfully, and it takes a bit more room in general. Hard things, pens. John Wick used a pencil, for heaven's sakes. Trays, anything. If you've got it, well, they don't give you a can of Coke, but something solid that you've got with you. Anything hard, anything with an edge you can't carry.
Yeah,
if you're trapped in a plane, I really advocate empty hand skills, but it takes a while to develop those. Rough number, 6 months training minimum in a good reputable martial arts school that teaches that, not just tournament stuff, but down and dirty fighting. And I've studied different martial arts. Some of them were really good at tournament stuff. Some of them were real down and dirty fighting, and you can't do that in competition because you break your playmates.
I remember a video I seen, and I want to say Masada Ayub was involved in it. I don't think he was the practitioner, but he was a part of the video. There was a person that had an old style wooden cane with the hook end, and not these hollow aluminum canes that have got the wide feet, but the old. My grandpa had one. Your grandpa may have had one. The old solid piece of wood with a hook on the top for your hand. And oh my goodness, was that effective? The person using it, I do not believe it was Masada Ayub, although it's been a long time. It could have been. The person using it was just seconds. The other person was on the ground, and the business end of a cane was against a throat. But that again, that's something you're going to want to go to classes. You're going to want to get some martial arts training for that. It's not going to come to you right now.
If I could get away real quick, I won't. I have got a collection of canes because I have a collection of orthopedic surgeries, and my canes are made by a company that does that very thing. It's a wood, fairly stout hickory or oak cane with a hook, with little crenulations on it for grip and to give edge, and an entire style of martial arts developed around cane. There's several martial arts that include canes, fairly common, and I have used one in self-defense. So, yeah, you just look around what's common in your environment that would not draw undue attention. Okay, if I'm carrying a pair of nunchaku or a 6-foot bow staff, a little out of place. And what did we say about that before?
Sure.
Okay. Oh, that ain't right. I want it to be something I would carry ordinarily, preferably not with Acme Weapons Company engraved on it. I want something very plain that would hold up. So yeah, canes are an awesome thing.
One comment, we got to get out of here.
We do.
Larry says the problem with many people are so grooved they do not even think about alternative uses for objects. Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, Larry. Tom, as I said, we got to get out of here. Anything coming up at Firearms Academy Seattle you want to plug?
Absolutely, yes. We're into February, and the rain is warmer now in the Pacific Northwest. We've got Steve Fisher on the range this week. It's a little late to get into his classes, but I'm looking ahead. My weekends are becoming full. We are doing our intro classes, both the introduction to handguns. The bullet thing comes out, the whole thing when you pull the trigger thing. Introduction to concealed carry. This is how to properly use a holster. This is how to choose one. This is how to draw and holster with it. We've got some beginning, I'm looking at the side here, close quarters carbine. Later on, we'll have some defensive shotgun coming, I believe, in March. All those blasters and new toys that you got for Christmas, now that the weather's getting better, we're ramping up our classes, and they're filling. I'm hoping the same is true for all the other schools. Good luck to all y'all.
Absolutely. All right. That's going to do it for me for the Monday through Friday broadcast this week. I do encourage you to come join me tomorrow, noon Central Time. Tomorrow it's going to be, let me get my calendar up here, Dan Waz, Tony Simon, and Rob Morse are going to be my commentators tomorrow. We're going to be doing a week in review. I guarantee you that Fifth Circuit opinion is going to be coming back up tomorrow, as well as the rest of the news of the week. That does it, folks. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.